The morning I found out my best friend of 20 years had vanished and taken every dollar our company had with him. I was standing in the middle of our office in a brand new suit. A suit I'd bought for a celebration that was never going to happen. There were 2 detectives in that room with me. One of them kept watching my hands, and in my jacket pocket, folded twice, was a note. Marcus left it on my desk, 7 short lines. To those 2 detectives, it would have looked like the ramblings of a confused old man. But I understood every single word. And honestly, that was the part that scared me most, because I couldn't tell them what it meant. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Let me back up. Because if you're going to understand what happened to me, you have to understand who Marcus was. Not who they said he was later, who he really was. My name is Ray Dolan. I'm 61 years old, and for most of my adult life, I built things with my hands. Cabinets, staircases, custom millwork. The kind of woodwork that goes into nice homes, the trim around a doorway that a rich man's wife runs her fingers across without ever knowing somebody sweated over it for a week. I live outside Columbus, Ohio, in the same house I've had for 30 years with my wife, Carol. We've got a daughter, Emily, and a grandson named Nolan who was 4 years old that year and thought I hung the moon. And I want you to hold on to that picture of me, a regular man, a husband, a grandpa, because that's the man this happened to. 20 years before all this, I was broke, flat broke. I'd been laid off from a cabinet shop that went under, and I had a truck, a table saw, and a mortgage I couldn't cover. That's when Marcus Reyes walked back into my life. Marcus and I had known each other since we were young men, worked side by side at that same shop years earlier. He was 2 years older than me, 63, at the time all this happened, and he had a way about him. Calm, steady, the kind of man who never raised his voice because he never needed to. Where I was all nerves and worry, Marcus was still water. He came to my kitchen one night, sat down across from Carol and me, slid a napkin across the table with some numbers scratched on it, and said, "Ray, let's stop working for other men. Let's build our own." We started Cornerstone Millwork and Cabinetry in a rented garage with 2 saws and a handshake. No contract, no lawyers, just a handshake between 2 men who trusted each other more than they trusted their own brothers. And here's the thing, that handshake held for 20 years. We grew that little garage operation into a real company. 40 employees, a warehouse, trucks with our name on the side, contracts with builders across 3 states. We put Emily through college on that company. Marcus put both his kids through school. We built something out of nothing, the 2 of us, and we did it clean. So you can maybe imagine what it meant when the offer came. A company called the Halberd Group reached out about 18 months before that terrible morning. A big outfit. Suits. Private jets. The whole thing. They wanted to buy Cornerstone, absorb it, and the number they put on the table, look, I'd never seen a number like that in my life. $14 million. To be split between Marcus and me. After all those years of scraping and saving and lying awake worrying about payroll, this was the finish line. This was retirement. This was Carol and me finally taking that trip out west she'd been talking about since 1998. This was a college fund for Nolan that meant the boy would never have to start his life broke the way I did. $14 million, and it was almost ours. The paperwork was nearly done. The closing was set for a Friday, and on the Monday before that Friday, Marcus was gone. I still remember how ordinary that morning started. I got to the office early, the way I always did. Fresh coffee, quiet building before the crews came in. And the first thing I noticed was that Marcus's truck wasn't in his spot. Now, that wasn't like him. In 20 years, Marcus beat me to work more often than not, so I called his cell, straight to voicemail. I called the house. His wife Diane picked up on the second ring, and her voice was thin, scared, and she said, "Ray, he never came home last night." That was the first cold drop down my spine. But it was nothing, compared to what came 20 minutes later, when our office manager came into my doorway white as a sheet, holding a stack of printouts, and told me the company accounts were empty. Not low. Not overdrawn. Empty. Every account. Operating funds, the reserve, the escrow we'd built up for the sale, gone. Millions of dollars, moved out over the weekend in a series of transfers. And every one of those transfers had been authorized by Marcus. His login. His signature, his name on all of it. I want you to understand what that does to a man. In the space of 1 hour, I went from being a week away from the best day of my life to standing in an empty office realizing that either my partner of 20 years had robbed me blind and run, or something far worse had happened to him. And I didn't know which possibility scared me more. By that afternoon, the detectives were there. The Halberd people were calling every 10 minutes because a company with no money in its accounts is not a company you can buy, and suddenly their $14 million deal was turning to smoke. And those two detectives, polite men, careful men, they started asking me questions. Where were you this weekend, Mr. Dolan? Who has access to these accounts, Mr. Dolan? Is there any reason your partner might have wanted to leave, Mr. Dolan? And I realized, standing there in that new suit, that they weren't just looking for Marcus, they were looking at me. Because when millions of dollars vanish and one partner disappears, the man still standing in the room is either a victim or the other half of the crime. And I had no way to prove which one I was. Carol picked me up that night because I was in no shape to drive. She held my hand across the console and said the thing I already knew she was thinking. She said, "Ray, did he do this to us?" And I couldn't answer her. Because part of me, God forgive me, part of me was starting to believe he had. Before I go any further, let me just say this. If this story's already got its hooks in you, do yourself a favor, subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and tap that bell so the next story finds its way to you. It helps more than you know. Now, let me get back to it. Because I haven't told you about the note yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I got up, went out to the garage, and I sat in my truck in the dark just to be alone with it. And that's when I remembered. In all the chaos of the day, the detectives, the phone calls, Diane crying, the accounts, I'd forgotten that when I first sat down at my desk that morning, before any of it started, there had been a folded piece of paper waiting for me. Company stationery. My name on the front in Marcus's handwriting. I'd shoved it in my pocket without reading it, figuring it was a note about the closing. I pulled it out of my jacket right there in the truck. My hands were shaking. I unfolded it under the dome light. 7 lines in Marcus's careful block print. And when I read them, my breath just stopped. Because those 7 lines had nothing to do with money, nothing to do with the company or the sale or the accounts. They were about something that happened between the two of us more than 20 years ago, something only Marcus and I knew about. A place. A promise. And the last line, the one that made the hair stand up on my arms, was a warning. He was telling me not to trust someone. And that's when I understood 2 things at once. Marcus hadn't run from me, he'd left me a map. And whatever he was afraid of, it was still out there. It was still out there, and it had a name I couldn't say out loud to anyone. Not to Carol, not to the police, not even, at first, to myself. Let me tell you what those 7 lines actually said, because I've read them so many times I could recite them in my sleep. The first line said, "Ray A, by the time you read this, I'll be gone." The second, "Remember Tullen's Creek. Remember what we swore." Then, "The money is safe. You know the only place I'd ever put it." After that, I couldn't warn you out loud. He was always listening. And then the line that made my stomach turn to ice, "Don't trust the man who signs our checks." The 6th, "Protect the families." That was always the deal. And the last one, just 3 words and his initial, "Finish it, Ray." For both of us. M. Now, to those detectives, that would have read like a puzzle with no answer. Tullen's Creek? The man who signs our checks? Meaningless. But sitting in my truck in the dark, I understood it the way you understand your own child's handwriting. Every line was a door, and I had the key to all of them. So, let me open the first one for you. Tullen's Creek, 19 years back. We've been in business barely a year. We almost lost everything before we ever really had it. We were undercapitalized, that's the polite word for it. Broke, that's the real one. We had orders we couldn't fill because we couldn't buy the lumber, and no bank in Ohio would touch 2 guys working out of a rented garage. And that's when a man named Silas Kroll found us. Silas was the kind of man who smells desperation the way a shark smells blood in the water. He called himself a private investor. What he really was a vulture in a nice coat. He offered us the money we needed, and buried in the paperwork, and language 2 working men like Marcus and me almost didn't catch, was a clause that would have handed him 51% of Cornerstone the second we missed a single payment. He wasn't lending us money. He was setting a trap to take the whole company for pennies, and he was patient enough to wait for us to step in it. Marcus caught it. Marcus, God bless him, read every word twice while I was ready to sign just to make the panic stop. He caught the clause. And instead of signing, the 2 of us drove out to a fishing spot we loved up north, Tullen's Creek, this quiet little bend in the water where Marcus's family had an old cabin. We sat on the dock half the night with a bottle between us, scared out of our minds, and we made a decision. We told Silas no, we found another way, we sold my truck, Marcus mortgaged his house a second time, and we clawed through that year on grit and prayer, and on that dock we swore something to each other. We swore that no matter what came, no matter who came, we would never let another man take what we built with our own hands. And we swore we'd protect our families first, always, before the money, before the company, before anything. Silas didn't take it well. I still remember the last thing he said to us. He smiled. He had this cold, patient smile, and he said, "That's fine, gentlemen. I'll get it back someday. These things always come back around." We laughed about it for years. Someday, we figured we'd never see the man again. We were wrong about that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So there I was at 2 a.m, holding a note that told me to remember that night and to remember what we swore, which meant Marcus was telling me something plain as day. Somebody was coming for the company again. And the money wasn't stolen, it was hidden. Marcus had moved it somewhere only I would think to look, somewhere tied to that promise, to keep it out of the hands of whoever was coming. He'd made it look like he robbed us, to save us. And then there was that 5th line. "Don't trust the man who signs our checks. Now let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself." If you'd spent 20 years trusting one man with your life savings and he vanished, and he left you a note pointing a finger at somebody in your own company, how sure would you be at 2 a.m. that you were reading it right? Because I wasn't sure of anything. I wanted to believe Marcus, but part of me kept whispering that maybe the note was the con, maybe the money is safe, was just a story to buy him a head start. The man who signed our checks was our controller, our numbers man, a fellow named Dale Whitfield. Dale had been with us, 11 years? He handled the books, the payroll, the accounts, all of it. Quiet guy, precise. Wore the same gray cardigan every winter, brought a homemade lunch, remembered everybody's birthday. The kind of man you never think about twice, which, I'd learn, is exactly the kind of man you should think about most. Dale had been front and center on the halberd sale from day one. Every wire instruction, every account number, every piece of the financial paperwork ran through Dale's hands. If anybody in that building had the keys to move millions of dollars around, it was him. And here's the part that kept me up the rest of that night. When the accounts came up empty that first morning, and everybody was panicking, Dale wasn't panicking. I keep going back to that. He was calm. He was helpful. He had the printouts ready before I even asked. He'd already, and I mean within the hour, told the detectives that in his professional opinion, this had Marcus's fingerprints all over it. He said it gently, sadly, like it broke his heart. And I stood there nodding along, because why wouldn't I trust Dale? Marcus knew, that's what the note meant. Marcus had figured out that Dale was moving against us, and he couldn't say a word out loud because he was always listening. Dale controlled the phones, the email, the whole office network. If Marcus had breathed one word of a warning through any of it, Dale would have known Marcus was onto him. So Marcus did the only thing he could. He beat Dale to the money, hid it, disappeared to keep himself out of reach, and left me a note on paper. The one thing Dale couldn't read over a wire. I should have felt relief. My partner hadn't betrayed me. But you know what I actually felt, sitting in that cold truck? Fear. Because if Marcus had to vanish to escape whatever Dale was, then Dale was more dangerous than any mild little man in a gray cardigan had a right to be. And I was still standing right in front of him, every day, smiling, trusting him. I decided, right then, I would not tell the detectives about the note. Not yet. I didn't know who was clean and who wasn't, and if word got back to Dale that Marcus had left me a map, I was certain of one thing. The money would vanish for real, and maybe I'd vanish with it. So the next morning I put the note back in my jacket, put on a face, and went to work like a man with nothing to hide. And Dale met me at the door with 2 cups of coffee and that same sad, gentle voice, and he said, "Ray, the detectives want to see you again." Alone this time, he put his hand on my shoulder. "I'm sure it's nothing." They did want to see me. And it was not nothing. Because when I sat down across from Detective Alvarez that afternoon, she slid a single sheet of paper across the table, tapped it once with her finger, and asked me to explain why one of those weekend transfers, over $2 million, had been routed through a personal bank account. An account in Marysville. An account I had never opened, never seen, never heard of in my life. An account with my name on it. An account with my name on it. My name, my social security number. An address that used to be mine, a rental Carol and I lived in back in the 90s, before we bought our house. Somebody had built a bank account out of the pieces of my own life and then run stolen money straight through the middle of it. I sat there staring at that sheet of paper, and I swear to you the room tilted. Detective Alvarez was watching me, and Detective Boyd was standing by the door with his arms crossed, and neither one of them was being warm anymore. The politeness was gone. And I understood in that moment that I was no longer a man they felt sorry for. I was a suspect. Maybe the suspect. "That's not my account," I said. And even as it came out of my mouth, I heard how it sounded. It's what every guilty man says. That's not mine. I've never seen that. Somebody set me up. Alvarez didn't even blink. She just asked, real quiet, "Then whose is it, Mr. Dolan?" And here's the thing. I knew. Sitting in that chair, I knew exactly whose it was. It was Dale's handiwork. Dale had every piece of information he'd need to build a fake account in my name. He'd done my payroll for 11 years. He had my social, my old addresses, my signature on 100 documents. He wasn't just stealing the company's money, he was framing me to take the fall for it. And if the police were looking hard at me, they weren't looking at him. But I couldn't say that. Because the second I pointed at Dale, he'd ask how I knew, and the only answer was the note. And the note was the one thing keeping me alive. So I said the only thing I could. I said, "I want to talk to a lawyer." And Alvarez nodded slow, like that told her everything, and she let me go. For now. I drove home that night with my hand shaking on the wheel, and I'll be honest with you, I have never in my life felt as alone as I did on that drive. My partner was gone. The police thought I was a thief. And the one man who could clear all of it up was the same man quietly tightening the noose around my neck. Carol was up when I got home. She always waited up. She took one look at my face, and she didn't ask a single question. She just put the kettle on. That's 40 years of marriage, right there. She knew when to talk and when to just make the tea, but when I sat down at that kitchen table, I made a decision. I told her everything. The note, Tullens Creek, Silas Kroll, Dale, the account in Marysville, all of it. Because I couldn't carry it alone anymore. And because if anybody was going to help me dig out of this, it was going to be the woman who'd been digging beside me for 4 decades. Carol listened to the whole thing without saying a word. And when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table, put her hand flat on that note, and said something I'll never forget. She said, "Ray, if Marcus wanted you to finish it, then that's what we're going to do. But we're going to be smarter than they think you are." God, I love that woman. Now, let me pull back for a second, because I want to be square with you about something. It would have been easy to just take that note to the police and dump the whole mess in their laps. Believe me, I thought about it. But you have to understand my position. I had no proof Dale did anything. The note didn't name him. It said, "The man who signs our checks," which meant something to me and nothing to a judge. Meanwhile, there was a bank account with my name on it and $2 million of stolen money running through it. If I walked in waving a mysterious note accusing our beloved controller, you know what it would have looked like. It would have looked like a guilty man trying to pin his crime on an innocent one. Dale had set the board up perfectly. Every move I made pointed back at me, so Carol was right. We couldn't fight this loud. We had to fight it quiet. We had to finish it, like Marcus said. Find the money and find the proof before the police found a reason to put me in a cell. And that meant Tullens Creek. The note said the money was safe, and the only place Marcus would ever put it. And I knew that place. It wasn't a bank. It was the old cabin. Marcus's family cabin, up on that quiet bend of water where we made our promise 19 years before. Nobody knew about that place. It wasn't in any company record. It was just ours. But before I tell you what I found up there, and I promise you, it was not what I expected. Let me take a breath and say this to you directly. If you're still with me, if this story's got a hold of you, take 1 second and hit that subscribe button, give it a like, and turn on the bell. It costs you nothing, and it tells this channel to keep making stories like this one. Alright, thank you. Now let's drive up to that cabin, because that's where everything changed. I went up on a Saturday. I told the office I was taking a personal day, which, given the circumstances, nobody questioned. I made sure I wasn't followed. I took back roads the whole way, checking my mirror like a man in a movie, feeling foolish and terrified at the same time. 3.5 hours north, into the tree line, up a gravel road I hadn't driven in years. The cabin was exactly as I remembered it. Small, weathered gray wood, a tin roof gone to rust, the creek behind it just murmuring along the way it always had, like it hadn't heard about any of our troubles. And Marcus's truck, the truck that wasn't in its spot that first morning, was parked around back under a tarp covered in leaves. My heart just about stopped, because that meant Marcus had been here, recently. I called his name, nothing. I walked the whole property, the dock, the shed, the tree line, no sign of him. The cabin was locked, but I knew where the Reyes family kept the spare, under the third stone on the path, same as 19 years ago. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely fit the key. Inside, it smelled like wood smoke and dust, and on the little table by the window, weighted down under an old fishing reel, was a second note. Same block print, same careful hand. But this one was different. This one was longer. And this one started with a line that told me my old friend had known for a long time that this day was coming. It said, "Ray, if you're reading this, then it worked, and you're still free, and I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. I've been watching Dale for 8 months. 8 months." I had to sit down. Marcus had known for 8 months, half a year, and then some, and never breathed a word to me. And as I read on, I understood why. Because what Marcus had uncovered wasn't just a controller skimming a little off the top. It was bigger than that. It went outside the company. And the name at the center of it, the man Dale was really working for, the man pulling the strings on the whole thing, was a name I hadn't heard spoken out loud in 19 years. I read that name, and the old fishing reel slipped right out of my hand and clattered on the floor. Because it was Silas Kroll. Silas Kroll, the vulture in the nice coat, the man who told us, with that cold, patient smile, that he'd get it back someday, that these things always come back around. 19 years. And he'd been out there the whole time, waiting, patient as a stone. I sat at that little table in the cabin and read the rest of Marcus's letter twice, and then a third time, because my mind kept refusing to hold it all. Let me lay it out for you the way Marcus laid it out for me, because this is where the whole picture finally came clear. Silas Kroll had never forgotten Cornerstone. To a man like him, we weren't just a deal that got away. We were a wound to his pride. 2 dumb tradesmen who'd caught him in his own trap and walked. So he did what men like him do. He waited and he watched, and he got rich doing to other people what he'd almost done to us. And somewhere in the last few years, he found out that Cornerstone had grown into something worth $14 million. And he found out we were about to sell. That's when the plan started. Silas didn't come at us head on. He was too smart for that. Instead, he got to Dale. Now, Marcus had done the digging, and here's what he found. Dale Whitfield was drowning. Gambling debts, the bad kind, the kind that come with men knocking on your door. Dale had been quietly stealing small amounts from Cornerstone for years just to stay afloat, and somehow Silas found out about it. So Silas had him, owned him. He told Dale, "You're going to help me take the whole company and the money from the sale, or I'll make sure everyone knows what you've been doing and you'll go to prison and lose your family." Dale, cornered and terrified, said yes. The plan was surgical. When the Halberd sale closed and the $14 million landed in the company accounts, Dale was going to move it, all of it, into a web of accounts Silas controlled overseas. Then he'd frame me for the theft. With Marcus and me out of the picture, me in a cell, Marcus discredited as a runaway thief. There'd be nobody left to fight when Silas moved in and picked the bones of the company clean. He'd finally get his, someday. He'd get all of it. But Silas made one mistake. He underestimated the quiet partner. He watched me, the nervous one, the emotional one, and figured I was the easy mark. He never watched Marcus close enough. And Marcus, my steady, still-water Marcus, spent 8 months building a case in the dark. He couldn't tell me, because Dale monitored everything that moved through that office, and one wrong word would have tipped them off and gotten the money moved before Marcus could stop it, maybe gotten us both hurt. Silas was not a man with clean hands. Marcus had learned that too. So Marcus made a terrible, lonely choice. The week before the sale, he beat them to it. He moved the company's existing funds, our operating cash, the reserves, everything that was actually ours, out of the accounts himself, before Dale could fold it into Silas's trap. He hid it where only I would look. Then he vanished, on purpose, to make himself unreachable and to force the whole thing into the open. He made himself look guilty so that Dale and Silas would think their plan was working, think Marcus had panicked and run, while the real evidence sat waiting in that cabin for me to find. And the letter told me where that evidence was. Under the floorboard beneath the wood stove, Marcus wrote, "There's a metal box. Everything's in there." I got down on my knees on that cold cabin floor, and I pried up the board with a screwdriver from the shed, and there it was. A gray steel lockbox. Inside, I'm telling you, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely open it. Inside was everything. A flash drive. A stack of printed emails between Dale and Silas, the two of them planning the whole thing in black and white. Bank records tracing the fake account in my name back to a computer in Dale's home office. Recordings. Marcus had recorded phone calls, meetings, Dale's voice admitting what he was doing, Silas's voice giving the orders. 8 months of patient, careful, meticulous proof. My partner hadn't just saved the money. He'd built the case that would put both those men in prison and clear my name completely. I sat on that floor and I wept. I'm not ashamed to say it. A 61-year-old man crying on the floor of a fishing cabin, because I doubted him. For those first few days, in the dark of my own heart, I believed, even a little, that Marcus had robbed me. And here was the truth. In a steel box, he'd risked everything, given up his whole life, made himself a fugitive and a suspect to protect me, to protect our families. Protect the families, that was always the deal, just like we swore on that dock 19 years ago. But there was one more page in that letter, and it took the wind right out of me. Marcus wrote that he wasn't coming back, not for a while, maybe not ever. Because Silas Kroll was dangerous, and once the trap sprang, Silas would know Marcus had beaten him, and a cornered man like that doesn't forgive. Marcus wrote that he was going somewhere safe, somewhere I shouldn't try to find him, until it was over and the men were behind bars. Don't look for me, he wrote. Just finish it. Give the box to someone you trust with a badge, but not the locals, Ray. Silas has money, and money buys ears everywhere. Go higher, go higher. Not the local detectives who already had my scent. Higher. And here's the thing about being handed the truth. It doesn't make you safe. It makes you dangerous to the people who buried it. Because sitting in that cabin, holding that box, I wasn't a suspect anymore. I was the one man alive who could bring the whole thing down. And that made me the one man Silas Kroll most needed to disappear. I put the box in my truck, I locked the cabin, and I drove back down that gravel road toward home with 14 years of evidence riding shotgun and my heart going like a hammer. I was maybe an hour from home, on a dark 2-lane road through the farm country, when I noticed the headlights. They'd been behind me a while. Too long. Every turn I took, they took. I sped up. They sped up. I slowed way down, gave them every chance to pass. They didn't pass. They just sat back there in the dark, matching me patient. And something about that patience told me exactly who it was or who'd sent them. Then my phone rang. On the truck screen, a name I hadn't dialed in days. Dale Whitfield. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. And that gentle, quiet voice, that sad, kind, gray cardigan voice, came through the speakers, calm as ever, and said, Ray, I think we should talk about what you found up at that cabin. Pull over. Pull over. I want you to picture it. Dark farm road, no street lights, cornfields black on both sides, a pair of headlights locked on my bumper, and that voice, the voice of a man I'd trusted for 11 years, a man who'd remembered my grandson's birthday, telling me to stop the truck in the middle of nowhere. I did not pull over. What I did was something I'm still a little proud of, honestly, considering I was scared out of my skin. I kept my voice steady, and I said, Dale, how do you know I was at a cabin? Silence on the line, just a second of it, but I heard it. I heard him realize he'd made a mistake. Because I'd never told a soul where I was going. The only way Dale knew about that cabin was if he'd had me followed, which meant those headlights behind me weren't a coincidence, and Dale had just admitted, without meaning to, that he was hunting me. He recovered fast. He gave a little laugh, sad and soft. Ray, come on. You're not thinking straight. This whole thing has you turned around. Let's just talk, man to man. I can help you. You're in a lot of trouble with that account in Marysville. And I'm the only one who can explain the books in a way that keeps you out of prison. A pause. But I need to know what Marcus left you first. And there it was. The whole game, right there in one sentence. He didn't want to help me. He wanted to know how much I knew, and whether the evidence that could sink him was sitting in my truck. So I lied. Best lie of my life. I said, there was nothing up there, Dale. Just an empty cabin and Marcus's truck. Wherever he went, he didn't leave me anything. I drove up there hoping to find him, and I came back with nothing. I let my voice crack a little on that last word. Wasn't hard. I don't know what he did with the money, Dale. I swear to God I don't. Long silence. Those headlights easing back, just a hair. He was deciding whether to believe me. And then, in the calmest voice you ever heard, Dale said, I hope that's true, Ray. For your sake and Carol's, I really do. And the line went dead. He'd said Carol's name. That's how I knew. This man would go all the way. He just told me in that gentle voice that my wife was on the table too. The headlights hung back for another mile, and then, at a crossroads, they turned off, gone. And I drove the rest of the way home with both hands white on the wheel, because I understood now that I wasn't just clearing my name anymore. I was protecting my family from a man who'd already decided we were in his way. I didn't sleep that night. Carol and I sat up till dawn with all the lights off, the box on the kitchen table between us, and we made a plan. Because Marcus was right, I couldn't take this to the local police. Alvarez and Boyd already had a fake account with my name on it and every reason to think I was dirty. And if Silas had money buying ears, then for all I knew, one of those ears was close. I couldn't risk it, so we went higher. There's a thing you can do. Most folks don't know it. You can take financial crime, especially fraud that crosses state lines and moves money overseas, to federal authorities. The FBI has field offices, and they have a public line, and they take this kind of thing seriously when there's real evidence. And I had real evidence. I had a steel box full of it. Now, before I tell you how that went, let me just say this one more time, because it matters. If you've come this far with me, if you need to know how this ends as badly as I needed to live through it, do me the kindness of subscribing, hitting that like button, and tapping the bell. That's how these stories keep reaching people who need to hear that the quiet, honest folks can win sometimes too. All right, thank you, truly. Here's what happened. I made copies of everything first. That was Carol's idea. Smart woman. We drove to 3 different places, made 3 sets of copies, and mailed one set to Emily with a note telling her not to open it unless something happened to us. We hid another set, and the originals we kept close. Then I called the FBI field office in Columbus. And I'll tell you, I expected to get a runaround. I expected nobody to care about 2 old cabinet makers and a company nobody's heard of. But when I sat down across from an agent, a serious woman named Agent Pruitt, and I opened that box and started laying it out, printout by printout, recording by recording, I watched her whole face change. Because what Marcus had built wasn't a hunch, it wasn't a story, it was a case. Bank records, a money trail, recorded confessions, the fake account traced to Dale's own computer, emails with Silas Kroll's name on them, and it turned out Silas Kroll was already a name the FBI knew. He had a history, other companies, other someday deals that had ruined people. They'd just never been able to get him, because men like Silas keep their own hands clean and let the Dales of the world do the dirty work. Marcus had handed them the connection they never had. He'd handed them Dale, and Dale was the thread that led straight up to Silas. Agent Pruitt looked at me across that table and she said, "Mr. Dolan, I need you to do exactly what I tell you for the next few weeks, and I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" And I said yes. God help me. I said yes, even though every part of me wanted to grab my family and run. What she asked me to do was the hardest thing I've ever done. She asked me to go back to work, to walk into that office every single day and look Dale Whitfield in his sad, gentle face and act like a beaten man. Act like I had nothing, knew nothing, found nothing. Act scared, which wasn't hard, but scared of the police, scared of prison, not scared of Dale. She needed time. Time to get warrants, time to trace the accounts. Time to build the federal case airtight, so that when they finally moved, not Silas, not his lawyers, not all his money could wriggle him out of it. She needed Dale to feel safe. She needed Silas to think the plan was still working, that Marcus had run, and I was cornered and the money would surface any day. Because the moment they got spooked, the money would move overseas and vanish for good, and Silas would slip back into the dark to wait another 19 years. So I did it. For 3 weeks, I lived a double life. Every morning, I put on my work clothes and drove to Cornerstone and let Dale bring me coffee. I let him put his hand on my shoulder. I let him tell me, in that soft voice, that he was doing everything he could to help the detectives understand the books. I nodded. I thanked him. I let that man believe he'd won. And every night I drove home and called Agent Pruitt from a burner phone she'd given me and told her every word Dale had said. It was the loneliest, sickest 3 weeks of my life. Do you know what it does to you? To smile at the man who tried to destroy your family? To say thank you to him? There were mornings I sat in the office parking lot and just breathed, in and out, until I could make my face into the face of a defeated old man. And then, on a Thursday, I remember it was a Thursday because it was the day of the week Marcus and I always used to grab lunch, just the 2 of us. Agent Pruitt called me on the burner at 6 a.m. and said 4 words. "Today's the day, Ray. Today's the day, Ray." She told me to go to work exactly like normal. Same time, same routine, coffee with Dale. Don't tip him off, don't act different, don't so much as look at the door funny. Just be the beaten old man one last morning. And whatever happened, she said, stay at my desk and let them work. So I did. I drove in as the sun was coming up. Dale met me at the door with 2 coffees, same as every day, and said, "Morning, Ray." "You holding up?" And I took the cup and I looked that man in the eye and I said, "Getting by, Dale, one day at a time." And he smiled that sad, gentle smile and patted my arm. And I thought, this is the last time you'll ever touch me, you son of a gun. And I went to my desk. At 9,040 in the morning, 3 black SUVs pulled into the Cornerstone lot. I watched them through my office window. I watched the doors open. I watched Agent Pruitt get out, and a whole line of agents behind her, windbreakers with those 3 yellow letters on the back, and they came through our front doors like a wave. And you know what I felt? Not triumph. Not yet. I felt my whole body start to shake, because 20 years of my life and 3 weeks of pretending were all coming down to the next 60 seconds. They went straight to Dale's office. I'll never forget his face. Through the glass, I watched Dale Whitfield look up from his desk, and I watched the color drain right out of him, and I watched him understand, all at once, that the quiet cabinet maker he'd written off as an easy mark had gone somewhere he never thought to look, higher. He looked up, and across that whole office floor, through 2 panes of glass, his eyes found mine. And I didn't look away. For the first time in 3 weeks, I let him see it. I let Dale see that I knew, that I'd always known, that I'd sat across from him every morning and taken his coffee and lied to his face the exact same way he'd lied to mine, except I did it to catch him and he did it to bury me. He mouthed something at me. I couldn't hear it through the glass. But I think it was, how? And I just held up my coffee cup, a little toast, from one liar to another. They walked him out in handcuffs at 10,015, past the whole office, past 40 employees who trusted him with their paychecks, past me. He didn't say a word. That gentle voice was gone, and what was left was just a gray, hollow, frightened man who'd gambled everything and lost. The cardigan didn't look kindly anymore. It just looked cheap. But here's the thing. Dale was never the real prize. Dale was the thread. And the moment they had Dale, cold, with all of Marcus's evidence stacked against him, Dale did exactly what cornered men do. He talked. Oh, he talked. To save himself even a little, he gave them everything on Silas Kroll. The overseas accounts, the meetings, the threats. The whole 19-year grudge. Dale, who'd been Silas's weapon, became the very thing that brought Silas down. They arrested Silas Kroll 4 days later at his big house on the water, 3 states away, and when the federal case came together, it wasn't just Cornerstone. Once Silas's name was in the light, other people came forward, other business owners he'd ruined over the years with that same patient, smiling cruelty. Marcus's evidence didn't just save us, it cracked open a whole history of it. It gave a voice to people who'd lost everything and thought no one would ever believe them. Silas Kroll went to trial. His lawyers were expensive and slick, and for a while I was scared it wouldn't be enough. But you can't lawyer your way around your own voice on a recording. You can't smile your way past a bank trail. In the end, a jury looked at everything my partner had built in the dark over 8 lonely months, and they didn't take long. Silas got sentenced to 17 years in federal prison. Dale got 6, reduced for cooperating. The man who signed our checks and the man who wanted it all back someday, both of them gone behind the same kind of walls they tried to build around me. And the money? The $14 million from the sale never made it into Silas's hands, because the sale had collapsed when the accounts emptied. But the money Marcus hid, our real money, our life's work, the operating funds and the reserves, every dollar was exactly where the note said it would be. Marcus hadn't touched a cent for himself, not one. It was all there, waiting, protected, just like he swore on that dock 19 years ago. With Silas and Dale in prison, and my name cleared, the Halberg Group came back to the table. And a few months later, on an ordinary Friday morning, in a quiet conference room, I signed the papers we were always supposed to sign. Cornerstone Millwork sold for $14 million, split down the middle. Half for my family. And half, every penny of it, set aside for Marcus and Diane and their kids, because that was always the deal. Now, I know what you're wondering. The same thing I wondered every single day. What happened to Marcus? For a long time, nothing. He'd said don't look for me, and I didn't, because I understood. Until Silas was locked up, my friend was in danger, and staying gone was how he stayed alive. But about a month after the sentencing, after Silas was behind bars for good, I got a postcard in the mail. No return address. Just a picture of a creek on the front, some quiet bend of water somewhere, and on the back, in that careful block print I'd know anywhere, 4 words, Tullin's Creek, come alone. I didn't tell anybody but Carol. I got in my truck the next morning, and I drove those 3.5 hours north one more time, up that gravel road, into the trees, and when I came around the last bend, there was smoke coming from the cabin chimney. And there was Marcus, standing on the dock, older and thinner and grayer than I remembered, with 2 fishing poles in his hands. I got out of the truck, and for a long minute, neither one of us could say a word. 2 old men, 20 years of friendship, everything we'd been through standing in the air between us, and finally Marcus, my steady Stillwater Marcus, cleared his throat and said, "You always were slow getting up here, Ray." And I laughed. And then I couldn't stop laughing, and then I was crying, and then we were just 2 old fools holding on to each other on a dock in the middle of nowhere. We sat out there till dark. He told me everything, where he'd been, how he'd lived rough and scared, how he'd read about the arrests in a newspaper in a diner 2 states over and finally let himself breathe. and I told him about the coffee cup and the toast I gave Dale through the glass, and Marcus laughed so hard he nearly went off the dock. Before I tell you the very last of it, let me leave you with this thought. You spend your whole life learning who to trust. And sometimes you get it wrong in the worst possible way, a man in a gray cardigan who brings you coffee. But sometimes you get it right. A handshake in a garage, a napkin with some numbers on it, a friend who'll burn his own life down to keep his promise to you. I lost 20 years of certainty in a single morning. But I found out that the one thing I built my whole life on, that handshake, that trust, was real. It held. When it mattered most, it held. Marcus and Diane took their half. They live up near that creek now, full-time, in a bigger place just down the road from the old cabin. Carol and I finally took that trip out west. Nolan's got his college fund. And every few weeks, Marcus and I still meet up on that dock, two retired old men with a couple of fishing poles. And we don't say much. We don't have to. We already said the only thing that ever mattered, 19 years ago, and again in 7 lines on a piece of paper. We finished it, together. Just like we swore. If this story stayed with you, if you believe, like I do, that the quiet, honest ones can still win in the end, then tap the video on your screen right now. I've got another story waiting for you over there, and I think you're going to want to hear it. I'll see you on the dock.